newspapers our size didn't go to the Olympics in those days, and still don't. But when I was hired here in 66, Perry Stewart was the editor and publisher, and he talked to Olympics right in our interview session, and the HT lived up to that and sent me to Munich in '72. At the time, Mark Spitz was the golden athlete in the games. He was on the cover of Life and Time and all the major magazines because he was going in with the goal of winning 7 gold medals. And as it turned out, he met that and set world records in every one of them. It was an amazing athletic performance to keep. You think about the idea of not just setting a record, but actually doing better than you'd ever done, 7 straight times. It was an amazing. The four of them, of course, were individual races, where the other 3 were relays. So that would be extra. But improving on the best he'd ever done in 4 events was an athletic performance that I think nobody could have conceived of. And so he was the by far the international star of those games. But all that went into eclipse. The night he won his last gold was the night that the Palestinians came over the fence and seized the Israeli building and ultimately led to 17 deaths. It was the all-time horror show at the Olympics, and none of us was prepared to cover a thing like that. I wasn't prepared to cover an international incident of that nature, and so we kind of felt our way through and did the best we could do in portraying what was going on. The shock to me at the time was that while this building was seized and while they were under siege and while there was a man with an Uzi walking around a balcony with threatening the atmosphere was almost as if it were a sideshow, and even to the point that competition continued for the first morning that those athletes were in, that was going on. I had a record of an event, I think it was in weightlifting, where the data on the results said the Israeli athlete disqualified did not show. Well, he was under kidnapping at the time, but that it was unthinkable that they actually continued the games at that point. I was all for resuming them afterward. Once they had a very, very moving memorial service in the stadium, and then the decision then was made to go ahead with the games. And I really thought that was the best decision at that point. I think all those young athletes had worked 4 years to get there, and in most cases they don't get another chance. That was it. So I didn't feel it was fair to send them home without, that certainly didn't minimize the loss or the tragedy of the thing. It took me about 40 years to realize that what that was not just our introduction as Americans, but the world's introduction to international terrorism, where people didn't really care if they died, if they made their point, and from there on, we've seen a whole new attitude toward that, but exemplifying the blasé way that was treated. When this man is walking around this building, by this time competition has been stopped, so the people there with tickets have nowhere to go. They're sitting on a hillside within easy rifle range of that, and it's like this is the day's entertainment. They're watching this thing go on, and I walked through there and oblivious to the fact that the guy could take off shooting anytime, because we all thought, well, no rational human being would just shoot into a crowd. Well, today's terrorism, who knows? And it was an introduction to something brand new in world history, and so in that respect, it certainly was the biggest news event I was ever exposed to. And I think what the fact that there wasn't any move made toward Mark by the Palestinians, and they were obviously the whole attempt was anti-Jewish. I don't think they knew athletics all that well. I don't think they knew who Mark Spitz was. I think had they made a move to get Mark, they could have easily done it because there was no security that would have protected him. They could have had him that night very as easily as they got the Israeli building. But I first learned of the occupation of that building at a press conference that was called for Mark at 8 o'clock in the morning after his last goal. Doc had left instructions with him beforehand. You don't give any interviews except what you have to do after a meet, after the evening's competition every time. No special individual interviews until everything's done. Then you can have one interview because Doc knew he was going to do that. He knew he was going to have a great Olympics, so that was the way it was set up. Then at 8 o'clock the next morning, there was a scheduled press conference at a separate building from the swimming, and probably I don't know what the number of journalists was. It was one big room that was completely filled, standing all around. Well, that's where they announced to people like me that a few blocks away, this was all going on. But we didn't have any problem with security or anything, walking right into the area where we were to get to that press conference. And by now the authorities knew what was, as you mentioned, the connection with Mark as being a Jew, how he could very easily be a primary target. So there were people in front of him, behind him, and the press conference was for what its purpose was a disaster. They were going to rush him in, rush him out, and there was nothing introspective about it at all. It was just a quick exercise that was carried out to get him out of there safely, and clearly that should have been the priority. Then the games resumed, and among the things that happened from after that was the U.S.-Soviet basketball game that happened about 3 days after the resumption. That has always been considered one of the all-time great robberies. I never thought that. I always felt it was the way it should have come out. But that's for a whole different argument. But I did not go along with the Americans turning down the silver medal. I thought that was the wrong approach. But the U.S. went ahead 50-49 with 3 seconds to go. Okay. The ball is to be passed in where it would be, but the Soviet coach had asked for a timeout, and the way you ask for a timeout in international competition at the time was they actually didn't make contact with the referees. They went through the bench, and the Soviet coach was at the bench asking for the timeout, and the referees let the game start, and the pass in was intercepted, and the celebration took off. Well, the head of the International Basketball Federation came out of the stands and said, "You can't do that. You got to allow the guy his timeout." What I've seen American games, high school games, all kinds of games where they did a do-over because the rules hadn't been followed, and to me that was that simple. They did deserve to have Well, they started again, but this time the clock showed something like 1 second to go, and they passed it in from mid-court in a quick hurry, and again there's a celebration. Well, again they moved in and said, no, you got to go back to the point where it should be and make the play. Well, the third time when they made the play, they made the long pass to Bailoff. Alexander Bailoff scored to the basket that won the game. I didn't see anything where anybody was cheated. That should have been done that way. They deserved to have the play run the right way. But in America, that was treated as outright theft because it had looked like they'd won the game with the celebrations going on and so forth. But I didn't see it that way, to be honest about it. And I'd been kind of brainwashed over the years by Bob Knight's terminology that a lot of times when IU won a game, he'd say we didn't deserve to win this game. The other team, the team that played the best game, lost. Well, in that case, the Soviets had played a lot better game than the U.S. had. The U.S. should have won the game, had better players, but they didn't deserve to win on the way they played that night, and they were behind the whole game. The only time they went ahead was that on Doug Collins' free throws with 3 seconds to go, I kind of differed with history on that one. But man, I know I'm in the minority. that's in America, they're absolutely convinced that they got to do it. Though thoroughly, totally cheated. But that was one of the points of difference between me and Bob too. Bob was a big fan of Henry Iba, the U.S. coach, and he was convinced that they were robbed. That was, IU came home from there with 10 gold medals in swimming. I think among nations in all sports, that ranked something like 6th. So it was an amazing Olympics besides Mark. On the 4x200 relay team, freestyle relay team, the 4 members, 3 were IU people. John Kinsella and Fred Tyler were the other 2 with Mark. John Murphy was on a relay team with Mark. Mike Stam was a backstroker, was on a relay team with Mark. It was just a spectacular performance by the Indiana kids, and at that time, I don't believe there was significant representation in any other sport, and that came later when track programs started to produce more and more athletes of that caliber.